The moment everything went silent did not arrive with drama. It came quietly, almost politely, slipping in around the edges of the noise. 1 second there were voices, footsteps, radio chatter, the normal pulse of a scene where everyone thought they knew what they were dealing with. Then something happened that the brain could not process fast enough. There was a shock in the air, a break in the pattern, and it felt as if sound itself recoiled. It was not the silence you find in a peaceful room. It was a silence that took space by force. At first, I did not recognize it. I thought maybe my ears had failed me. The world looked the same, people still moving, but everything felt distant. It was like watching a moment through thick glass. You see shapes, you see motion, but nothing connects. I could see her fall, but the sound of her body hitting the ground never reached me, even though I knew it had to be there. The silence was louder than any noise could have been. The strange part is how the mind stretches time in moments like this. What was probably a few seconds felt like an entire chapter of thought. I could feel my breath leave me, not in a dramatic collapse, but in a slow, steady leak, as if the silence had reached into my lungs and pressed pause. People around me froze between steps. Someone's hand hovered in the air. Eyes widened, but even the alarm in those eyes felt muted. It was the kind of stillness that does not ask permission. It takes over everyone at once. I remember noticing small details first. The way dust floated in a sunbeam, the edge of her sleeve brushing the ground, the sharp scent of metal in the air. None of these things mattered in the big picture, but in that suspended moment, they were the only things that felt real. The silence had stripped everything else away. Thought narrowed into a tunnel. Emotion went flat and cold. I was not afraid yet. Fear needs motion. Fear needs sound. Both were gone. Someone finally moved, but even that movement seemed to glide rather than break the stillness. A hand reached out toward her, slow and careful, as if touching the moment too quickly might shatter it. I watched that hand, watched it hesitate, and for a second I felt like we were all inside a photograph. The world had taken a breath and held it. Then something inside me started to resist the quiet. Not an instinct to shout or panic, but a feeling that this silence was not natural. It was a silence made of impact, of shock, of disbelief, and it held a weight that pressed against the chest. My own heartbeat felt too loud, like it would disturb the scene. Even blinking felt like an interruption. I tried to speak, but my voice stayed locked in my throat. Words did not belong in that moment. In the middle of that strange stillness, her presence felt enormous. Even lying there without moving, she filled the space. Nothing about her looked defeated. It was as if the silence existed because the world did not know how to react to someone like her being struck down. She had always carried herself with a steadiness that made others straighten their backs when she walked past. To see her on the ground shook something deep, and the silence seemed to agree. I caught myself waiting for someone else to break it. Maybe a command, maybe a cry, maybe the crackle of a radio. But no one moved fast enough. No one spoke soon enough. It was as if every person there had been pushed underwater, hearing the world only as a distant vibration. A strange calm spread through the space. Not peace, not acceptance, but a calm made of shock. A quiet that held everyone by the neck. In the middle of all that stillness, I felt something shift. A small flicker of awareness. A reminder that silence can only hold you for so long. The world needed to move again. Someone needed to act. The moment had frozen us, but it was not meant to last. The air felt tight, waiting, expecting something to break the pause. And even before anyone took the first real step, I could sense that the silence was starting to loosen, as if the scene itself knew what was coming next. The shot that should have ended her story did not arrive with warning. It came fast, sharp, and final in a way that made everyone freeze before their minds caught up. Moments like that do not feel real at first. They do not feel connected to the world you were standing in just seconds earlier. One moment she was steady, focused, doing what she always did. The next moment something unseen moved through the air and found her. It was that simple and that brutal in concept, even if the memory of it feels blurred around the edges. What struck me most was the way her expression changed. It was not dramatic. It was subtle, almost private, like she was processing something only she could feel. A small shift in her eyes, a faint tightening around her mouth. There was no cry, no collapse that belonged in a movie. Her body reacted before any of us did. She staggered once, not even far, just a tiny step back as if someone had tapped her shoulder. Then her knees softened, and she lowered toward the ground in a way that felt strangely controlled, as if she refused to let even this moment make her look fragile. Everyone around her moved too slowly, not by choice, but because the mind needs time to understand what it has just seen. I remember someone starting to reach for her before pulling their hand back, unsure if they could help or if they were witnessing the last seconds of someone they thought could survive anything. The shock spread through the room like cold air. It made every movement feel heavy. No one wanted to believe that this was real. The force of the moment did not come from sound or spectacle. It came from the weight of what it meant. She was not the type of person you imagined falling. She carried herself with a strength that felt almost unshakable. She trained harder, thought sharper, and moved with a quiet confidence that made others around her feel safer. Seeing her hit that point of vulnerability cracked something open inside each of us. It felt like watching the foundation of a building give way, even if only for a breath. Her body reached the ground in a slow, careful way, like gravity was trying to be gentle. She rested there with an odd calm, almost as if she had simply chosen to sit. Her breathing changed, quiet and shallow, but present. That alone stopped the fear from becoming complete. If she had stopped breathing, the entire room would have broken into chaos. Instead, there was a strange steadiness in the air around her, a small hint that she had not surrendered. I remember crouching beside her, not touching her at first, just trying to understand what she needed. Her eyes flickered, not unfocused but searching, as if she was checking the space around her. There was no panic in her face. There was strain, yes, and effort, and a kind of resolve that came from deep inside. But she was not lost. She was fighting for control even while lying on the ground. Someone announced they were calling for help, their voice trembling but trying to sound firm. Another person knelt on the opposite side of her, hands hovering over her without landing, afraid to make things worse. Everyone was caught between urgency and caution. The air felt tight with all the things we wanted to do, but did not know how to start. Training tells you what steps to take. Shock makes those steps feel far away. She was aware of us. I could see it in the way her gaze moved, steady but strained, taking in the people around her. She blinked once, slowly, almost like she was reminding us that she was still with us, still present, still refusing to fade. That single blink did more to pull us back into motion than any shouted order could have. It told us we still had a chance. It told us she expected us to act. Her hand twitched against the ground. Not a dramatic gesture, just a faint attempt to brace herself. Even injured, she tried to participate in her own survival. That small movement stirred something inside all of us. It made the fear shift into determination. It reminded us of who she was, and why giving up on her was not an option. Someone finally placed a steadying hand near her shoulder. Another person checked her breathing with a soft touch. Movements grew more confident. Voices gained purpose. The room stopped feeling like a frozen moment and started to feel like a place where effort mattered again. Her presence grounded us the same way it always had, even while she lay there, fighting quietly, holding on with a strength we were only just beginning to understand. The strength no one saw coming did not arrive with noise or drama. It showed itself in small ways at first, subtle enough that some people missed it. But for those who were close to her, the signs were there. Even as she lay there fighting for air and balance, something in her posture refused to collapse. Her body had taken the hit, but her spirit had not budged. There was a steadiness in her eyes that pushed back against the fear surrounding her, and it was so unexpected that it shifted the mood of the room without a single word spoken. Most people imagine strength as loud or forceful. They picture someone shouting commands or powering through pain with visible defiance. Her strength was quieter. It was the kind that lived deep in the center of a person, the kind that does not need to announce itself. It simply exists and waits for the moment it needs to rise. When everything should have broken her down, that strength surfaced with a slow, patient insistence that surprised even those who had trained beside her for years. Her breathing was shallow, but it was steady. Even that steadiness felt unreal. Each breath carried effort, but each one also carried intention. It was as if she had made a pact with herself to hold on as long as she possibly could. No panic, no surrender, just a quiet refusal to let the moment claim her. Anyone else in her position would have gone still or slipped into shock, but she seemed to anchor herself with each inhale, grounding her body with the same discipline she had carried every day of her life. Someone whispered her name, trying to reach her through the haze, and her eyes shifted in response. It was a small movement, but it spoke louder than any answer she could have given. It showed she was still connected, still aware, still fighting. That single glance contained a mix of pain, clarity, and willpower that made everyone around her straighten their posture. It reminded us that she had spent years building a kind of inner toughness that did not disappear when things went dark. Her hands told their own story. One curled slightly inward, not in fear, but as if she was trying to pull strength from the ground beneath her. The other twitched, reaching for stability or maybe trying to reassure the people beside her. Even without full control of her body, she wanted to participate in her own rescue. She was not waiting passively for someone to save her. She was working with us, inch by inch, breath by breath. That kind of determination felt impossible in the moment, but there it was, solid and undeniable. I remember watching her try to shift her weight, just a small adjustment of her shoulder, and feeling my chest tighten. It was not reckless. It was deliberate. She was testing herself, checking what parts of her body still responded, and doing it with a calm focus that did not match the severity of the situation. Most people break down in moments like that. She scanned her own condition the way she had been trained, slow and controlled, almost like she was walking through a mental checklist while her body refused to quit. There was a moment when she locked eyes with me. It lasted only a second, but there was something in that look that stays with me. It was not fear. It was a kind of steady, silent message that she was still in this, still holding on, still capable of fighting. It felt impossible, but it was real. That look carried more strength than any words could have. It reached every person in the room. It forced us to remember who she was and what she was made of. People often talk about toughness as if it is something you show off in front of others. But her toughness lived in the quiet choices she made. She chose to keep breathing with control instead of letting panic win. She chose to track the voices around her instead of letting her mind drift away. She chose to focus her energy instead of letting fear drain it. These were not dramatic choices, but they were powerful enough to alter the direction of the moment. The more time passed, the more her inner strength revealed itself. It showed in the way her jaw tightened when a wave of pain hit. It showed in the faint furrow of her brow when she concentrated on staying awake. It showed in the steady rise of her chest that insisted on continuing even when her body wanted to stop. Every small signal she gave reminded us that she was not slipping away. She was fighting in the way only someone who had trained their mind and heart to endure could fight. Her strength was not the kind that shouts. It was the kind that holds on in silence, the kind that keeps a flame alive even in the worst kind of storm. It was the kind of strength you only understand when you see it up close, when you watch a person refuse to let go even when everything around them says they should. What Iron Hearts really means is something most people never get to see. It is a phrase that gets thrown around to describe toughness, resilience, or pride, but those are only surface layers. The real meaning shows itself in moments when a person has every reason to give up and chooses not to. It is not about muscle or bravado. It is about a deeper kind of strength that comes from discipline, belief, and a refusal to let fear decide the outcome. Watching her that day revealed what that phrase truly carries, because she lived it without saying a word. Iron hearts are not formed in a single moment. They are built over years of pushing past limits, failing, getting back up, and refusing to let setbacks define the path ahead. People like her do not wake up one day with an extraordinary level of toughness. They shape it over time, through habits and choices that seem small on their own, but add up to something unbreakable. Every early morning run, every cold ocean swim, Every drill that tested patience and stamina, every long night spent refining skills, all of it became part of that inner core. That core was the iron. It did not shine. It did not boast. It simply existed, steady and real. When she went down, the situation stripped away everything that was not essential. Her rank, her reputation, her training titles, none of that mattered in that moment. What mattered was the strength at the center of her being. Iron hearts reveal themselves most clearly when everything else falls apart. When a person is left with nothing but their will to keep going. The world expects collapse. Iron hearts answer with a quiet kind of defiance. Not loud, not reckless, but focused. A decision to stay present, stay aware, and keep fighting in whatever way the moment allows. Even while lying there in pain, she held on to her awareness. She responded to voices, not with perfect clarity, but with intention. That intention was enough to lift the spirits of everyone around her. Iron hearts do not draw attention. They influence quietly. They steady the hands of the people trying to help. They calm the panic that tries to rise in others. Her presence did that. The team felt her strength even when she could barely move. It steadied us more than any shouted command could have. Some people think iron hearts mean fearlessness. That is not true. Fear is natural. It shows up even in the strongest people. What makes an iron heart different is how it handles that fear. It does not run from it. It acknowledges it, then works through it one breath at a time. I could see that in her face. There was strain, yes, but behind it was a deep foundation of control. She was scared, but she did not let that fear pull her into panic. She let it exist without letting it take over. That is what strength looks like in its truest form. Her training had prepared her for countless scenarios, but nothing can fully prepare a person for a moment when their own survival is uncertain. What training does provide is discipline, and that discipline showed in the way she managed her breathing, kept her eyes open, and stayed connected to the world around her. Iron hearts lean on discipline when the body falters. They lean on memory, habit, and intention. She did not need to speak to show that she was bringing every bit of her training to bear. Iron hearts also carry a sense of responsibility. Even in her condition, she watched the team members around her, reading their expressions, giving them that small reassurance that she was still fighting. It was subtle, but it mattered. That is another part of the meaning. Strength is not only about the self. It is about understanding how your presence affects the people who depend on you. She had carried that responsibility for years, and she carried it even then. People often imagine heroes as larger than life, but iron hearts show that heroism is built from ordinary choices repeated over time. She was extraordinary not because she was invincible, but because she remained centered in a moment that could have broken her. Her body was hurting, her breath was weak, but her focus stayed sharp enough to anchor the rest of us. There is a unique silence that surrounds people with this kind of inner strength. It is not the same silence that followed the moment she fell. It is calmer, almost grounding. Being near her felt like standing next to something solid and unshakable. Even when she could barely move, she radiated a sense of control that cut through the fear in the room. That quiet presence is what iron hearts create. A sense that no matter how dark the moment becomes, there is still something strong enough to stand against it. Her strength in that moment did not come from the idea of being a hero. It came from who she had always been. A person who trained, prepared, endured, and kept moving forward even when it was hard. A person who carried a level of discipline that could withstand fear, pain, and uncertainty. That is what iron hearts are made of. Not perfection, persistence, not noise, steady resolve, not invulnerability. The will to hold on when holding on feels impossible. How the team responded when fear hit was a study in human instinct colliding with training. No matter how much preparation you have, the first seconds after something like that happens are always messy. There is a moment when fear lands in the room like a cold wind, tightening every muscle, stealing breath, and trying to take control. Even the best trained teams feel it. But what separates a strong unit from an unsteady one is how quickly that fear is recognized, contained, and redirected into action. That shift did not happen all at once. It happened in waves, each one pushing the team from shock to purpose. The first reaction was pure disbelief. You could see it in the eyes of every person standing nearby. It was the kind of stare that comes from witnessing something the brain refuses to accept. Some froze where they stood. Some took a step forward and then hesitated, unsure if they should rush in or stay back. This hesitation was not weakness. It was the moment between instinct and decision, the tight space where fear tries to take control. For a few breaths, the room held nothing but the weight of that hesitation. Then training started to push through the fear. One person moved, then another. It was not coordinated at first. It was a collection of individual reactions, each one trying to find a balance between urgency and caution. The team had drilled countless scenarios, but drills cannot fully match the emotional shock of seeing one of your own go down. Still, pieces of that training surfaced. Voices softened. Movements became deliberate. People looked for tasks rather than letting panic dictate their choices. Someone reached for their radio with steadying breaths. Another person dropped to their knees beside her, checking what they could without causing harm. A third scanned the surroundings, making sure the situation was contained. Each action was influenced by fear, but not controlled by it. Fear was present in every heartbeat, but discipline began to shape how it was expressed. It was like watching a room full of shaken people slowly remember who they were trained to be. The team members closest to her worked with a quiet urgency. They did not shout. They did not scramble. They focused. Their hands shook at first, but steadied as they worked. One person counted her breaths under their own breath, keeping track without adding noise. Another checked her pulse with a careful touch and nodded to confirm she was still with us. These small gestures carried so much weight. They were not dramatic, but they were precise, and precision in a moment filled with fear is its own form of strength. Fear creates two impulses. One is to rush. The other is to freeze. The team had to push past both. Some team members forced themselves to step back and give space, even though every instinct told them to crowd around her. Others forced themselves forward, even though fear told them to stand still. It took effort from each person to find that middle ground where clear action lives. You could see the tension in their shoulders, the concentration in their eyes. They were fighting their own fear in order to help her fight hers. As more people joined in, the room began to take shape again. There was structure where moments earlier there had only been shock. Someone took responsibility for communication. Someone else monitored the environment. Another watched the people working directly on her, ready to support or step in if needed. A quiet chain of responsibility stretched across the space, unspoken but understood. There was also a powerful sense of unity. Fear often isolates people, makes them feel alone even when standing in a crowd. But this team did not let that happen. The moment they realized she was still conscious, still breathing, something shifted. Their fear did not vanish, but it lost its control. They were no longer reacting to the moment. They were responding to her. Her strength, faint but steady, gave them something to anchor to. She became the center of their focus, and that focus sharpened their instincts. No one looked away from what needed to be done. No one slipped into panic. Even those who were trembling kept moving. Even those who struggled to hold back tears found a place to stand and a role to fill. There is a kind of courage that comes from love and loyalty, and that was the kind of courage filling the room. Every person there cared about her. Every person there had trained with her, laughed with her, trusted her. That connection became the driving force behind their actions. Fear did not disappear. It pulsed through every second. But it did not win. The team moved in a rhythm built from shared training, shared trust, and the shared belief that she was someone worth fighting for. They steadied each other. They steadied the moment. And even though everything felt fragile, the team refused to collapse under the weight of what had just happened. Why her survival changes the rest of us begins with the simple fact that nothing looks the same after watching someone come that close to the edge and fight their way back. When something like that happens, it does more than shake your nerves. It alters the way you see strength, the way you see fear, and the way you measure what a human being is capable of. Before that day, we all thought we understood toughness. We thought we knew what resilience looked like. But watching her hold on, watching her pull herself through a moment that could have erased her future, redefined everything we believed about endurance. The change started quietly. It was not some dramatic shift in the team or a sudden burst of emotion. It was the way people looked at each other afterward. A new awareness settled in, something sharp but steady. We had been reminded that life can change in a single second, and that every moment we share has more weight than we usually give it. People who had trained together for years suddenly paid more attention to how each other moved, talked, breathed. There was a deeper appreciation in the way they interacted, a stronger sense of responsibility to one another. Her survival also forced us to confront the limits we place on ourselves. We watch movies and hear stories about incredible resilience, but it is different when you see it up close. It makes you rethink your assumptions about your own limits. She showed us that the human body can fight through more than we imagine, and that the human mind can stay present even when everything is trying to pull it away. That changes the way you train. It changes the way you approach challenges. It changes the way you see your own excuses. People began to push themselves harder in small ways, not because anyone told them to, but because they had witnessed what real fighting spirit looked like. The memory of her lying there, holding on with nothing but sheer will, stayed in the back of everyone's mind. It became a quiet motivator. During workouts, during tough drills, during moments when someone wanted to quit early, her example was right there, reminding them that they had more inside them than they believed. It was not pressure. It was inspiration, a gentle but firm push toward becoming better. There was also a shift in how the team viewed vulnerability. Before that, vulnerability was something most people tried to avoid showing. They hid discomfort, hid fatigue, hid stress. But seeing her at her weakest, and seeing how she fought through it without shame or hesitation, changed that mindset. Vulnerability was no longer seen as failure. It became something human, something that could be faced rather than hidden. People opened up more. They talked more. They supported each other with a deeper sense of honesty. Her survival also reminded everyone that strength is not just physical. It is emotional, mental, and sometimes spiritual in ways we cannot fully explain. When she started to recover, even the smallest actions felt meaningful. A faint smile, a slow nod, a few words spoken with effort. These moments had a way of grounding the rest of us. They reminded us that progress does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is a quiet step, barely noticeable unless you are paying attention. And we were paying attention to every detail. Another change came in the form of trust. The team had always trusted one another, but this kind of experience deepens trust in a way nothing else can. They had watched her fight. She had watched them respond. That shared moment created a connection that went beyond professional bonds. It strengthened the unspoken promise that each person would show up for the others when it mattered most. That kind of trust cannot be faked or forced. It is earned through moments that test the entire group. Her survival also made us rethink the pace of life. Before that day, everyone was constantly moving, training, planning, pushing toward the next goal. Afterward, people slowed down just enough to notice the details they used to overlook. They checked in on each other more often. They appreciated the quiet moments with a little more intention. They understood that strength is built not only in intensity, but also in connection, reflection, and care for the people beside you. But the most important change came from what her story showed us about hope. Hope is easy to talk about in calm situations. It is harder to believe in when someone is lying on the ground fighting to stay conscious. But she proved that hope is not naive. It is fuel. It carries people through the worst moments and drives them toward survival even when the odds seem unfair. Watching her pull herself back into the world showed us that hope is not a soft emotion. It is a form of strength that lives in the center of a person and refuses to let go.